Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me on this stream. Today we'll learn together about how to build beautiful and accessible forms with Shadcn-UI and how to do it fast. After the stream, you will be able to build forms yourself and do it quickly. I'm going to show you how making fully functional forms can be fun with the right tools. And I also want to invite you to our newline Discord. There is a channel link at the bottom where you can ask questions and learn more about Shadcn-UI. This workshop is a small part of a full course that me and the newline team have prepared for you about Shadcn-UI, of course. And the course is going to be live soon. You can find the link below. There is a lot of modules there, anything that you need to know to be a master in Shadcn-UI. And you can also find in the description the link to the code of this workshop, like what we're going to build. And feel free to ask questions on the chat, and I'll try to answer them at the end. So let's start, yeah. What we're going to build today in 1 second. We're going to build a new event form in a meetup-like applications. This is how it looks like. Users should be able to define the event title, the description, the location, and the event date. The inputs will have a label and some of them an icon as well. And we're going to build a date picker. So you're going to learn how to use Shadcn-UI components from scratch. We're going to build a new project together. Then you'll learn how to integrate Shadcn-UI and React hook form, and then how to validate the form fields using Zod. Short intro about myself. I'm Eyal. I'm a software engineer focused on front-end application. I've been developing software and web products for multiple companies since 2016. I'm currently the founder of Fuchs, a software development firm, and I've used Shadcn-UI since it came out, and I feel that it really boosted my front-end productivity. And I wanted to share the Shadcn-UI way with other developers, so more people will be able to build better front-end applications quickly. I feel like it's a real paradigm shift in component design and component implementation. But why do we need Shadcn-UI? Building forms well can be challenging. It's a tedious task. Why Shadcn-UI make our life as front-end developers easier? I think forms is a good example of that. Forms are one of the basic building blocks of any web applications. You need to manage complex state, and you need to include validation. You need to include event handlers, pristine and clean state, and much more requirements that any form need. You can get rid of those requirements. You need to make it look well, and most of the time it's according to some designer request. Doesn't always fit the default native icons, elements, sorry. And you need to make sure the form is accessible. Most of the time, if you build a form, it can become pretty bloated and inaccessible, and you need to be wary of that. It requires a massive time investment from developers to implement forms well. And you can even say that most of the time it's the part that's taking longest to implement on most front-end applications. Without the right tools, all those tasks are kind of a headache. You can go into weird bugs. You can spend a lot of time making accessibility work well. And about the designs, this is where I think Shadcn-UI really shines. If you use an already made UI library, most of the time you'll try to customize it to your the company designer request. This can lead to messy code. This can lead to a lot of wasted time. And if you decide to build your own set of components from scratch, whether it's input, text area, date picker, you'll face a massive time investment. Without a dedicated team, without other developers, maintaining and updating custom components can be really overwhelming. Validation is another pain. Obviously, when you build forms, you need to write your own custom rules and logic based on the requirements. You need to prepare regex for phone numbers or emails. So thanks to the library called Zod, which plays really nicely with React hook form, which manages the state, we can integrate them both into Shadcn-UI components, and validation can become really simple. So I think Shadcn-UI offers the third way for the UI. It offers a way to reuse headless components that have beautiful built-in design that you can easily customize, and you own all the code. You don't need to wait for the author to release a new version of the package for a new feature. You can just build it yourself. So if you stay with me on the stream, by the end of the workshop, you'll be able to build forms that looks great, have validations and form functionality baked in, and are easily styled and accessible. you will be able to do it pretty fast. When designer will ask you for something like changing the color or the behavior on the functionality, you'll just say no worries, I can do that. You'll be the master of the art of building great forms. So this was a lengthy introduction. Let's just start. I'm going to open my terminal. And I'm going to create a new project using Next.js. We're going to use React as well. And I'm going to use the next template. The Shadcn-UI is already prepared. So you can find it on github.com/shadcn/next template. I'm going to create it now. It will be called my app. And it will take a moment to install. I'll open it in the meantime. All right, awesome. Let's see if it's finished. And I'm opening the terminal here as well. And I'm going to do npm run dev just to make sure. Okay, I do need to install. Let's wait a second. Awesome. I'm also going to upgrade to Next 14 because we do want to enjoy some of its features. Sweet. Now we can look at package.json. And just to give a bit of overview about what we have here. So obviously we have the next packages we just installed. With next dev, we can also build and start later on the next server. And this is basically what we need. We want to run npm run dev. And you want to make sure that it's running. So I'm going to open the browser at localhost 3000 for me. If you define another port, it should work as well. And this is what you see at the beginning. This means that you are ready. Now, Shadcn-UI offer a great CLI for installing component. Let's look at it for a second. I can run Shadcn-UI at latest and see the outcome. And there are three commands that we can run. The init command, which will initialize a new project. We have already done it through the template. The add command, which will add new components. And then the diff command, which will help with the updates. We're going to use the add command to install some of the components that we're going to need and we're going to use. The components are the form one, the input, the text area. Popover and calendar will help us build the date picker, and then the toast, the table, and the card. Make sure you install all of them, but if not, you'll probably see an error later on, and you can just go to the terminal and install them again. When we install the form component, we can see that Shadcn-UI also added, beside a few Radix UI components like the React label, popover, slot, and toast, we can also see that it has installed Zod and React hook form for us, which is great. It's come built in, as we said, with the right tools to build great forms. Let's start. I'm going to do npm run dev again. Make sure your server is running. Awesome. And then we can also see under the components folder, all the components that Shadcn-UI is installed for us. This is the button, the calendar. The button was already there, but the calendar, the card, form, input label, and so on and so forth. We can simply use them in the pages and in the apps that we are looking for. Let's start. We're going to create a new component called create event form. There's not going to be too much inside of it for now. And I'm making it the client component. We won't go into server components right now. We're basically using browser features because I want to focus on Shadcn-UI and not on like other feature of Next or React. So we're gonna export a new const called create event. And for now, we're simply going to return a span which will say create event. We want to integrate this component in the page before we can start. I'm going to make the page a client page as well. And I'm going to replace everything inside with the following: create event. I do have auto imports. I do want to disable my copilot. So we simply write code. Awesome. You should have something like this in your pages. And we can check that we are rendering this inside. Perfect. This is what you see. Pretty basic. But let's start building the form. The first thing that we need, the first step, is to create the form schema. We need to define what are the parameters that the form should accept. Zod comes installed, as we've seen, with Shadcn-UI. Zod allow you to define shapes and objects and arrays and primitives like strings and numbers, and then run validations on them when you define the schema. Let's see. I'm going to import Z from Zod. And then I'm going to create the form schema. I'm going to use a special function called object. And then I'm gonna create the shape of the form. So you've seen the field before. So it's title, which is a string. It's required. So we're gonna add minimum of 1 character. And then we're gonna add a message when the validation failed. We're gonna say title is required. You're gonna see soon how this will be rendered automatically by Shadcn-UI, thanks to its integration with React Hook Form and Zod. This will be in the UI without us doing almost anything besides rendering components. So I'm rendering the title, I'm adding a description, which is optional. So I'm not adding the main function. Then I'm adding a date, which is a string as well. It is required. And then I'm going to add the location, which is required as well, because then people won't know where to come. Awesome. Now we want to add the onSubmit prop to the create event function. The onSubmit prompt will be a function that receives event. We'll see in a second what is the event, and return void. What is this event? The event params. We're going to create a type, and we're going to export it, which is the infer value of Zod from the form schema. What am I missing? Infer form schema. Let me look at the syntax because I have forgot. It's the type of form schema. Awesome. Then the event on the onSubmit is going to be event param. This is our form. This is this type that's created based on the schema include the TypeScript types of the Zod object that we define. Zod plays really nicely with TypeScript as well. So we're going to import and render the dialog, which is a component we've installed, or I thought we've installed, but I forgot to. So if you forgot as well, you probably forgot because I haven't said it, add a dialog as well. I'm using the Shadcn-UI CLI to do that. And I'm also using npx instead of installing it globally. And then I'm going to run the server again, so don't forget to run the server so you'll be able to see the app. And then we can start import the dialog component. So it's going to be in components/UI/dialog, and that's the first component that we're going to use from Shadcn-UI. And we also want the dialog trigger, which is the wrapper around the button that will open the dialog content. And we're also going to use the dialog title as well. Now replace the create event content with a dialog component, a dialog trigger, which we will render in a second, and under it a dialog content. This structure is pretty popular in the Shadcn-UI or the Radix or the headless UI patterns. You have a trigger, which is the part that is visible to the user by default. It can be a button or it can be a span, it can be whatever. You can have a table here. And dialog content is hidden until the trigger is clicked. This is managed and prepared for you, and you can simply not worry about all the accessibility related things and the right attributes to be on the DOM and the functionality. You get the behavior for free. It also has a great design, so we're going to see it in a second. I'm going to use the button as well. And the button will say create new event. Then we're going to create a new component called create event form, which will represent the form itself. The create event component, the one at line 22, is basically the wrapper around the create event form and the create new event button, the wrapper of both. So anywhere in your application, if you want to simply add a create new event button, you render this component. And if you want to render only the form, you can use this one. So let's create it. It will be pretty basic at the beginning as well. And we're going to return simple div from it at the beginning. Or maybe you can use the card. Let's import a card, add a card header. I think we also want to remove the border from the card because we already have border in the dialog. And we want to use the card title, create event. And then we'll render the create card content as well. For now, let's just say form. We're going to render it in a second. Awesome. Let's do a short overview about what we wrote, and then we're going to see it live on the browser. So we have imported Zod and created a form schema. And then we created the event param type using the infer function of Zod. We created the create event component, which is a wrapper around the dialog, a dialog trigger, and a dialog content. We added a button called create new that shows the create new event string. And then we have the create event form, which is the component that will show the actual form that we're going to build in a second. So go back to page.tsx, and yeah, we already have the client, use client directive there. And we need to pass the onSubmit function. So we're going to want to have a state which is keeping the events that we are adding. For now, it can be a database in the future. We'll use state for now. We can also import the event params type. So the event are from the event params type. This should be event params. And then we want to render a title, which is events, and the create event button at the right side. We're going to see it in a second. So let's implement the submit function. It will receive an event and simply add it to the list. It should be an array of event params. I have updated the type. Notice that if you are missed that. And then we'll already implement the onSubmit function. We're going to see it in a second. So I'm having here a div, a pretty simple div, and then we're going to create another on top of it. We're going to add an h2 title here, which is simply event. And then we want to style that. So the class name will be here container empty12. And here we're going to add a flex, item center, justify between. And I don't think we need too much else for now. Maybe we need width and full height. And here we also want to do the column flex and align center or item center. That's pretty much what we need. After we finish with the form, we'll render here a table that will show all the events that we've created in this session. Let's render. We wrote a lot of code. Let's try and see if we have anything meaningful to show. It's right now compiling. And we have an error. Let's see what the error is. Hydration failed because we have a button inside a button. We need to pass, should be params, but we need to pass the asChild prop to the dialog trigger. Let's see that again. And now we don't have any error. We do want to make sure it's full width. Awesome. We can maybe limit the width of the content with the max width Excel, maybe even to Excel. And that's pretty much what we need. Let's style the title as well. Gonna have a text Excel and font bold class names. We're using obviously Tailwind if I haven't said that. And then we have the event's title here and the create button here, which are pretty much centered. We're going to click create event and we're going to see the dialog pops up. Right now it only has the title and the close functionality. If you click outside, it will be closed as well. But now we need to implement the form. This is what we are here for. So let's go back to the events page. We're going to initialize the form. I'm on the create event form page. We haven't used the dialog title. And now under the create event form component, we want to initialize a new form. We're going to use the React hook form for that. We're going to use the use form hook. And we're going to pass the resolver from the Zod library. We're going to add an import. It doesn't import it immediately. I'm importing Zod resolver from hook form /resolvers/Zod. And we need to call it. This should be an object, obviously. And we need to call the Zod resolver with our form schema. This is the integration. This is where Zod and React hook form, the use form hook, are integrated together, and React hook form know how to resolve the types and the definitions on our fields. We then need to pass default values. The title will be empty and the date will be empty as well, the location and the description. And we now initialize a new form component. We maybe want to pass actually a default date here, so users won't forget to edit. Then we want to use Shadcn-UI form component. And we also want to wrap it with an HTML tag inside the card content. Let's see the form component first. This is the component that Shadcn-UI have installed for us, have copied and pasted using the CLI on our code. And it's mostly a wrapper around a few components. The React hook form, which we can see the form component of Shadcn-UI is basically the form provider for React hook form. If we go inside, we're inside the React hook form definitions. And then there is the form field with a controller. And we have a few hooks and a few default styles, like the form item one, that will help us make the beautiful forms faster. For example, the form description. We're going to use it in a second. You can see that we already have a class name defined. Perfect. Let's start using it. Let's render, instead of form, the form component from Shadcn-UI. And we want to spread the form object inside of it. What we must do is to pass the form HTML element under the global form tag. We need to pass an onSubmit function, which is the form handle submit provided function. And we also need to add to the create event form the onSubmit function definition. It will receive event params as well and return void. Perfect. Let's use it. We won't see anything right now because we are not rendering anything beside the form tag. If we go to the dialog, we can see that it's pretty blank. We can't do anything basically. So we need to start define our fields. The first field we're going to render is the title. We need to import the field, sorry. We're going to import it from here. Form field, the form item, the form label, the form description, and the form error, the form message, which is actually the error. Let's remove some redundant lines. Do we have an error here? Because we need to pass the param. Notice what I've did right now. I've passed the onSubmit function into the create event form component, which comes from the create event component that is rendered in the page. So now we want to render our first fields after we've added the imports that were required for the fields. We're going to render a form field. This is the literal component. We're going to pass a control to it, which is the form.control property. Then the name will be the title. This will match the title schema definition that we have on the form schema with the UI and with the validation. The resolver will know how to match the name of the field. The field, sorry, will know how to match the field by the name. And then we can render. We receive a render function that gets a field in return. And we simply render a form item with a form label. And the label will be title. And then we can render under it a form control with an input component. We're going to import the input component at the top. Don't forget to add it, since I have auto import. And the form control is simply a wrapper around the inputs. The input can be a date picker, it can be a text area, but for now we're literally using an input. And we're gonna pass the event title in the placeholder prop. Perfect. What's missing? We need to spread the field object on the input element. The input element receives a forwarded ref and receives the input props, but we are not passing it ourselves. Notice that we haven't done any value setting or using the onChange function here. We're simply letting the React hook form field, which we receive at the form field component, do the magic for us. We don't need to handle any of that. If we want, we can definitely do it, but we don't need to. And now we can close the form field, format it, and then we can see it live on the event form. I can start right, and I can see that everything is working. That's good. Make sure that you have followed everything and you imported the input, the form, and anything else. We need to render the form message as well to view errors. We won't see errors until we submit, and this is going to be only after we have added the full list of components, of fields, basically. We now want to show the date picker. We're going to create it. Shadcn-UI doesn't have a built-in date picker, but I've created a new component under the components folder called date picker. It will be a combination of the popover and the calendar components from Shadcn-UI. Let's see it for a second. If you go to Shadcn-UI website and go to the docs, there is a calendar component that you can use, but it's not a standalone one. It's not a date picker, it's a date picker. You can't use it as a field. For that, we need to create the date picker component. You can't install it because it's a combination of the popover and the calendar. Popover simply opens the calendar component, and then there is a matching of the props from the field. I'm going to copy and paste it from Shadcn-UI with the minor changes. I have added the onChange and the date value props, and then I'm passing them down to the calendar and to the label of the button. So I'm gonna now create a new form field under the title one and pass a control to it. The name is obviously date, and the render will be the field as well. Anything will be pretty much similar to the component, to the title. And in the form label, I want to render a div with the map. Honestly, I don't think we need a div, but we want the map pin icon from Lucida React that comes with the next template. And here we're gonna do a flex gap to item center. And then we're gonna render the date string to the user. Inside the form control, we're going to render the date picker. This will import the date picker for me. Make sure you have imported the date picker. And I'm gonna pass the date as the field value with the date object because this is what it accepts to receive. And the onChange function, as I've told you previously, we can simply do whatever we want here. I'm going to use the form set value function for the date field, and I'm going to do date to ISO string. That's it. I now have a date picker. I also want to add the form message. And I want to close the form field component as well. If I don't receive a date object for any reason, I can simply pass an empty string to the set value. Let's see. Let's open the browser. Create new event. And then we can add the gaps, but we can see that we can select and change the value of the date of the event. Let's add a bit of styling to the form. We're gonna do a flex call to make the flex in a column way. And then we're gonna add a gap of maybe 4. You know what? We can do even 8. Looking much better. Perfect. We're now missing 2 form fields. The location one and the description one. So I'm gonna add the location fairly quick. I've obviously used the wrong icon. We need the calendar icon on the date and the map pin icon for the location. So I've copied and pasted the date form field, and I'm going to use a simple input here as well with the field props on it and with a small class name, which is the same as the input one. We don't even pass any class name there. We can add a placeholder with New York. And let's format everything. Let's see that this is working. Awesome, we do have the location as well, and we can write what we want here. And then the last piece will be the description. For the description, we're gonna render a text area. So we don't need the icon here. This will simply be the description. But we do want a text area instead of the input. I do hope I've installed that. I did. And we don't need a placeholder for the description. And we can also simply pass the field as well. Awesome. Let's see it in action. I do want to add some styling to the labels. I want to make the icons a bit smaller. I'm using the text muted foreground from Shadcn-UI. You can learn more about it in the course. We're speaking a lot about Shadcn typography. There's a complete module around building a news site with the correct typography, with Shadcn-UI components, and it's fairly fun. Awesome. And I do want to change the labels to have the text muted foreground as well. Sweet. Beautiful. I do think it looks better, but that's up to you. What we are missing is the submit button. Right now we can do anything we want, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just like literally sending up the values. For the submit button, we don't need anything sophisticated. We can simply use Shadcn-UI button component with the type submit and the submit text. It will be auto-filled. And if we will try to send the values, let me refresh. If we will try to send values, where we will try to send the form with the values that are required empty, we will see the messages. We haven't done anything besides add it to the form schema. That's pretty mind-blowing to me because this is so easy to implement forms well this way. So description is not required, and we probably haven't rendered the form message under the date. We did. My guess would be that we already have a default value, but if I remove the default value from the date, we get an invalid time value because this is how the date picker is built. So let's leave it aside. But if we try to submit the form with one of the fields having an issue, we will simply see the error message at the bottom. We can also customize that. Let's say we want to make it a bit less with text red 1000 to make it a bit more fun. We can simply change that everywhere we want. We can also make a reusable component out of it, of course, but then we've basically controlled the UI of the form message, but we kept the behavior as is. If we submit without doing anything, without filling the correct values, we will see an issue. The user will get an indication that something is wrong. So this is the bad case. Let's see the good case. We had a title. The title will be the Shadcn-UI meetup. It's gonna happen on June 15. The location will be in New York. And for the description, I'll invite you to join the Shadcn-UI meetup. If we submit, it probably submitted. We forgot to close the dialog, but we will be able to see the table here. That's what we need to add. The user wants to see the events that were added. So let's go to the top, and we first want to control the dialog. We want to add an open state here, React state, with false by default, and then pass the open prop and the onOpen change callback. When the open change by the user, for example, once the user clicked on the site, the onOpen change function will be called, and then we will set the control set open state ourselves. But we can also pass the onSubmit or the handle submit function to the create event form that will close the dialog after we've submitted, and then call the onSubmit function with the event. The event is equal to the event params type. And instead of onSubmit, we'll pass the handle submit. You can call this function however you want. I prefer the handle and on. On coming in the props, and handlers are inside the components, but that's just like a convention. So now after we'll submit the form, I'm just filling test values, the dialog will be closed by default. What's missing for us is rendering the page. I will look in a second if there are any questions in the channel, but basically we've already built everything that we need for a form. We have the form items. Let's look at the anatomy of a form field. We have the form field component. We have the control prop, which we receive from the React hook form headless form library. We are passing it to the form field component. We're setting the name, and then we are rendering. Basically, we could have rendered anything. We don't need it to be a form item. It can be a simple div. With a simple input. But we've decided to use Shadcn-UI components to make it look better. We can also customize Shadcn-UI form components much more than what we did. We can pass like background red BG red 100 as we did before, and the form item design will change. You're controlling everything that you need in order to match designers' requests, as we've said. You also have validation built in already by the form schema that you've used. So beside the anatomy of the inside, the inner input, which can be a date picker or a color picker or whatever you want, or a select, anything else is coming prepared from Shadcn-UI, which is making it very easy and very quickly to implement any form that you'd like. Now, the next thing we want to do, as we've said, is to show a table with the events that we created. We're not going to save it in a database for now. It will simply be a client-based thing. And we're going to import the table component from Shadcn-UI. And we're going to render the head. We're going to render a row. And we're going to add here the head cells. We need the title. We then need the location. And we'll also add the date. We probably want to format the date, so I'm going to import the format function from date functions, which Shadcn-UI used by default. And then I'm going to render the table body, which will be a map of the event array. We're going to render a row for each of them. And you're also going to see how easy to render tables with Shadcn-UI, which is also something I'm speaking about in the course. and then a cell table cell, yep, with the event title, and then the event location, and the event date formatted. We're going to use the PPP format, and let's see the table. We're only seeing an empty state right now. Let's also add some sort of a gap between those two. Maybe we need a bit more. Flex call, gap. Maybe it's the container settings. Nope. Let's add a margin top for the table. Ah, probably forgot it to refresh. All right. Gap 8. I'm used to the auto reload being faster. And then we have the simple table here. We don't have anything. We can add an empty state if we want. If there's no event length, we can add. We can also add the create event form. And pass the on submit handler. Or it's actually an inline function. Perfect. If you go back to the browser, it's not styled. And we do have a iteration failed. Yeah, you shouldn't do a div inside a table. So let's leave it aside for now and just see events being rendered. We're going to have the Shadcn-UI meetup event. We're going to change that, add New York, and we can add a short description. And after we've submitted, we're going to see the event being added to the table. It's obviously fairly simple client state, but you can obviously move it to the backend, send requests, use server actions or whatever you want in order to save the events to the database. But we already have what we need to build great forms, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, I hope you've learned something. Let me know if you have any question. I'm gonna open the YouTube stream to see if you have any question right now. Someone is asking, is there a template for Vite with React? There is one, of course, that you can use. Pembe, thank you for asking the question. I will send it after the chat. Duxfar, thank you very much for saying the size full. This is a great addition. I'm not sure about Svelte. I think there is some sort of, there was a question if application like Svelte can use Shadcn-UI. I think there is some sort of a port, but Shadcn-UI is pretty much built for React. All the components are React based. Maybe the Vercel team is working on something there. But yeah, that's I guess pretty much it. So thank you very much for joining. I really appreciate it. If you have any other question, feel free to reach out. I'll add there is my Discord channel below. And thank you so much for coming.